Hi everyone, a very good evening and a very warm welcome to the session. I hope you guys are doing absolutely fine and amazingly well. Taking good care of yourselves and your loved ones. बहुत बहुत स्वागत है आपका आज के सेशन में. नमस्कार, सस्त्रीकाल, bonjour, आदाब. Let's get started with the second session of our chapter. Actually third, not second, right? The third session of our chapter of the pastoralists in the modern world. And today we're going to talk about the pastoral nomads of Africa. Africa से होगी हमारी introduction, but इससे पहले कि Africa के pastoralism से हमारी introduction, let me quickly introduce myself. Hi बच्चों, मेरा नाम अंकना है. And I'm your expert for social sciences at Embibe. I come with an experience of more than 9 years in the field of education, where I've done my studies in the field of humanities and hence specialize in science, social science and English. And I've also taught the students both online and offline for CBSE and ICSE. And it has been a wonderful journey talking about this chapter. इसको broadly दो हिस्सों में divide कर सकते हैं. We'll have movement of pastoralists in India and pastoralism in Africa. So आज थोड़ा सा, yesterday we discussed about how colonization basically impacted the lives of Indian pastoralists. A little bit of that is left that we'll be covering up today, and we'll have a quick introduction to pastoralism in Africa as well. The concepts that we're going to do is how did the survival of pastoralists happen in colonial rule, right? Because we read how these rules were so strict, it was restricting so many things, it was bringing so many limitations, but the people survived. Or if they did or not. What happened to the pastoralists? What was the result of these changes? That we'll be discussing. We'll talk about the pastoral nomads, the Maasai nomads of Africa, the division of Maasai land. So it seems to be something related to the Maasais, right? And we'll talk about the Kuku land herders of Africa and the colonial border restrictions on the movement of African pastoralists. So basically after India, we are now going to explore what happened in Africa and to the people over there. The moment the colonizers went, जब colonizers यहाँ भी पहुँच गए तो इन बेचारों के साथ क्या हुआ ये भी आज सीखेंगे और समझेंगे. So we'll start with a quick recap. Before I get started with the recap, I quickly want to say hi to everyone. Who all do we have over here? Good evening बच्चों, बहुत बहुत स्वागत है आपका. I just will quickly read the names out. Hi Radhika, good evening. I'm doing absolutely fine बच्चे. How are you? Hi Miss Ba, good evening बच्चे. Very warm welcome to the session. I think I read और भी नाम पढ़े थे मैंने. बाकी बच्चे एक बार वापस hi लिख देंगे. Hi Tarun, good evening. Welcome guys. Please make sure that you're letting your friends know that we are getting started with the discussion of pastoralism in Africa today, and it's going to be an important portion of this chapter, so they should definitely not miss on it. और भी बाकी जो बच्चे हैं सेशन में अपना नाम मतलब just go ahead, write whatever you want to in the chat so that I can say hi to you and see who all do we have over here. Hi Atira, good evening. Hi Kushagra Sinha, very warm welcome to the session and very good evening बच्चे, आपका भी बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. और भी कोई है who's left? I'm sure there are a lot of students left. I can see a lot of students are here, but you've still not said hi. तो आप सबके को मेरी तरफ से hi मैं पहले ही कर देती हूँ. Hi Mohammed Rehan. I seem a bit low today. नहीं, I feel very energetic. I'm not sure. I'm just a little unwell, but otherwise everything is fine. Hi Drushti, good evening. So let's get started. ठीक है, चलो अब शुरू करते हैं. जैसे मैंने आपको बोला, अपने दोस्तों को भी बता ज़रूर दीजिएगा कि आपका सेशन शुरू हो चुका है और आज अफ्रीका में पैस्टरलिज्म की डिस्कशन होगी. चलिए जी. तो सबसे पहले हमने देखा that pastoralists were living their life very happily, very peacefully in India. Before the Britishers came, they had a proper rhythm, they had a proper cycle, everything was going as they wanted. They were securing food for their, their cattle, and they were securing pastures for their sheep and goats. They had their own system of herding, trading, a cyclic movement, everything. But the moment the Britishers came, all of that got disrupted. What were the changes that were brought in by the Britishers? Whatever changes they did bring in the new rules and regulations, it reduced the grazing ground. Why? Because they started converting the grazing grounds into cultivated land, because if the cultivation was happening, they were able to make more money through the revenues and taxes on the production and by selling the production. Taxation, including grazing taxes, burdened the pastoralists economically, right? So all of them had to give tax for each of the cattle that they would take out for grazing. That would only make them more, that would only increase their expenses more and more. Restrictions on movements were there. Why? Because the forests were protected, the grazing lands had been changed to cultivated lands. So they could now not go to their regular places which was always available for them to feed their animals. It was not continuous anymore. Intensive grazing would happen because there was very limited options, and only those options were available for everyone, so everyone would go there. It would start declining the quality and the quantity of the grasses over there, the pastures, and ultimately as a result of which the animals started getting malnourished, started falling sick, and also the mortality rate, the death rate increased a lot. Then there was the Criminal Tribes Act, which basically declared few of the tribes as criminals. They were not allowed to move anymore. They were settled and forced to settle in a particular village. They were supervised by the police, and there were a lot of restrictions on them. The policies, obviously, all of them caused the pasture shortage and resulted in the decline of the livestock, the number of the animals that were there. Wasteland rule bhi tha, which was basically changing all the grazing lands into cultivated lands and that was additional problem which we saw, right? And tax imposition only strained the pastoralists. All of this just uprooted their settled lifestyle and their livelihood. It led to the deterioration of the pastures, reduced the animal stocks, economic hardships, everything that was now being faced by these poor fellows. Okay. Now, nomadic pastoralists in India face a lot of challenges, and we have already seen that. But was that the case only in India, or did that happen somewhere else as well? Was it just Indians that couldn't cope, or was the problem with the colonizers and their petty, approach and their selfishness and their greediness to earn more and more money at the cost of other people's and animals' life? So how did the people, like, let's say in Africa and other places, survive? What happened? All of that we're going to discover today. So let's get started. Sabse pehle we're going to understand about how did the people cope with these changes in India that were happening, or what happened to the pastoralists in India, because the point is that there were a lot of limitations, right? Hi Simran, good evening. कुशाग्र तुम्हारा नेट बच्चे हमेशा ही खत्म हो चुका होता है, पर कोई बात नहीं, ठीक है. So coping with the changes, so we see that when taxation started, okay, when a lot of tax had to be imposed, when there was less pasture, okay, which means less food, they figured out that if they reduced the number of animals that they had, they will have to pay less amount of money. They will not require a lot of food, a lot of fodder, right? Hi Anjali, good evening, welcome to this session. So they decided that let's say if they had 100 cattle, 100 animals, they will probably bring it down to 60, 40, etc. तो अब उन्होंने क्या किया, 100 के जगह बिल्कुल आधे से भी कम या आधे से थोड़ा ज़्यादा अपने एनिमल्स के नंबर को चेंज कर दिया. कुछ लोगों ने कुछ नए पैस्चर्स ढूंढे, which means जुगाड़. They somehow figured out an alternative. But this was not really an option for everyone. Very less were blessed and very few could get their hands on new pastures which would help them survive and get through. Richer pastoralists started buying land and gave up their nomadic life. So see, there were few pastoralists who had a lot of animals, who were making good money from the trading, and they were able to survive. But how did they survive? Not by carrying forward the same occupation. Same काम को करते करते आगे नहीं बढ़े, कोई बदलाव नहीं आया. उन्हें अल्टीमेटली सर्वाइव करने के लिए अपने नोमैडिक लाइफ को, अपने पैस्टलिस्ट के लाइफ को चेंज करना पड़ गया, ठीक है. एंड व्हाट दे डिड, व्हाटएवर मनी एंड सेविंग्स दे हैड, फ्रॉम दैट दे बॉट अ लैंड एंड बेसिकली बिकेम फार्मर्स or land owners, where they were working with the farmers. So because they had money, it was possible for them, but there were very less amount of rich pastoralists, you guys. बहुत सारे बहुत rich pastoralists नहीं थे, बहुत कम थे. Most lost their cattle and became laborers. Now this loss, how did it happen? Their cattle basically died. When we say they lost their cattle, what we mean is that the cattle were not alive anymore. They lost them, or they sold whatever were left to others at whatever price so that they could get whatever money out of it. थोड़ा बहुत पैसा लेकर के settle कर गए. और अब क्योंकि उनके पास, they were not like the rich pastoralists to buy a land or had enough money, they started working as laborers for the Britishers. So now they would be these people who will work on a daily wage work, or maybe get hired for manufacturing something in factories, or building the roads and the dams and the buildings, construction activities, all of these things. And some of them became settled peasants others took to more extensive trading. Few of them, they figured out how they could settle down in one place and change into a farmer, whereas few of them decided that whatever they were trading in, they had to scale up that trading. Now these were happening with some cattle or some animals, some livestock still left behind, especially for the last one. Okay? But of course, the primary role of pastoralists started seizing down a lot. धीरे 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 करके बहुत कटौती होने लग गई in whatever they used to do otherwise, which is very sad. They, all of them and most of them lost their identities and drastically reduced in numbers as pastoralists, and also their livestock, their animals drastically reduced in numbers. Now we are going to talk about the pastoral nomads of Africa. अब हम कहाँ की बात करेंगे? अब हम अफ्रीका की बात करेंगे. अफ्रीका बच्चे, see, we already know that the placement of Africa enables it to have a lot of varieties of plants as well as animals. That is why even in today's date, you will see various species of animals are found there in Africa because of its placement, because of where it is. It's very, very beneficial for the natural resources of flora and fauna to flourish freely over there. Plus, there is so much of land. The land is huge and the population was very less. तो बड़ी बड़ी ज़मीनें थी, बहुत थोड़े थोड़े लोग थे. It was very easy for people to spread out and it was very much possible for them to have huge pastures, huge grazing land, hence providing for food for their animals, their cattle, their sheep, goat, whatever, camel, whatever they had, whatever they were rearing, whatever they were breeding, right? So Africa was, and that is why it was a major place where pastoralist community was huge. तो सबसे बड़ी pastoralist की community आपको अफ्रीका में इसी वजह से मिलेगी because the support system naturally was very, very strong over there. Even today, 22 million Africans still depend on some form of pastoral activities for their livelihood. आज भी करीब 2 करोड़ लोग, राइट, 2.5 करोड़ लोग, 2 करोड़ 20 लाख लोग जो है डिपेंडेंट है. मोर देन 2 करोड़ पीपल आर डिपेंडेंट ऑन pastoralist activity one way or the other, and that is how it has had its base in Africa. ठीक है. If you talk about these communities have been of Bedouins, Berbers, Maasai, Somali, Boran, Turkana. So these are the names of the communities that have found their ground and their place as pastoralists. These communities have predominantly inhabit semi-arid, which is semi-dry, not completely dry, not a complete desert per se, but kind of a dry region, not so moist and wet, and the arid and a completely dry deserts where rain-fed agriculture is challenging. So especially where farming cannot be a method of survival, जहाँ पे सूखा है थोड़ा, जहाँ पे रेगिस्तान है, where it's desert, where there's not a lot of rainfall, farming is not the best method to lead your life. Farming सबसे अच्छा ऑप्शन नहीं है पैसे कमाने का. ऐसी सारी जगहों पे खास करके हम किसे पाते हैं? Pastoralist community को पाते हैं. They have basically set their foot over there. Okay, so let's quickly answer the question, which of the following is a pastoral community in Africa? Nama, Gujjar, Maasai और जैन. इनमें से कौन सी कम्युनिटी जो है वो एक pastoralist कम्युनिटी है अफ्रीका में? आपको वो नाम बताना है. So we have Misbah who has answered absolutely correct in perfect timing. Wonderful. Dhanush, Drushti, मोहम्मद रेहान, तरुण, बिल्कुल सही जवाब. काफी जल्दी आ गया है, बहुत ही बढ़िया. राधिका ने भी सही राधिका ने भी अटेम्प्ट लिया है. गुड जॉब अंजलि. वेटिंग फॉर यू टू आंसर. गाइस, इट इज द मसाई. मसाई लैंड के बारे में भी पढ़ेंगे हम, तो आप थोड़ा सा याद कर लेंगे कि जैसे कि आपका अलग अलग नाम है। मसाई भी एक पैस्टरलिस्ट कम्युनिटी है। बाकी सारे कम्युनिटीज जो हमको यहाँ पे मेंशन्ड है वो इंडिया के या इधर उधर ऐसे रैंडम नेम्स है, आर नॉट ऑल पैस्टरलिस्ट कम्युनिटीज। ठीक है, अब what else did they do? How what different kind of things would you say about the features of the pastoralists in Africa? तो उनके पास भी बहुत तरह के जानवर होते थे, जस्ट लाइक इंडिया। दे हैड cows and buffaloes, the cattle, the camels, goat, sheep, donkeys. ठीक है, तो varieties of animals. And what was their primary source of income? The things that they produced from these animals: milk, meat of these animals, animal skin, leather, wool. जो भी इन जानवरों से different products they would get, they would trade, they would sell that, and they would earn money. And the amount of animals that each of them had was huge. So they would make good money by selling these products because it used to be on a big scale. Some of them were engaged in trading and transport to supplement their income, while others combined pastoralism with agriculture. So there were also few pastoralists who had like a mix of both, right? कुछ सिर्फ pastoralists थे, कुछ जो है उसी में trading और transportation देखते थे। ठीक है, when you say transportation, using the animals for transportation, moving from one place to the another, helping the other people, doing the trading of these materials. Whereas few would combine farming along with this. Some of them took various odd jobs. ठीक है, कुछ लोग क्या करते थे, they were pastoralists but they would have a side hustle, they would have a side job as well. Moonlighting करते थे वो, ठीक है, to augment their relatively low and unstable earnings from pastoral activities. We know pastoral activity does not pay you a lot, is not consistent all the time. You sometimes may get more money, you sometimes may get very less money. तो उसको balance out करने के लिए, in order to create a balance and figure it out, they would always have an alternate option as well. Now talking about the Masais की अगर अफ्रीका में बात करें, बच्चे, they were the cattle herders who primarily lived in East Africa. So they were like this huge group of the pastoralists. That is why we are reading about them, because there were many of them. तो ये जो है आपके प्राइमरीली ईस्ट अफ्रीका में, ईस्टर्न पोर्शन में रहते थे अफ्रीका के, लगभग 3 लाख इन द सदर्न पोर्शन ऑफ केनिया एंड अनदर 1.5 lakhs इन तंजानिया. सो इन द ईस्टर्न पोर्शन दिस केनिया, दिस तंजानिया. ठीक है, तो ये जो है केनिया और तंजानिया में, दे वुड बेसिकली बी हियर इन द सेंटर. 3 lakhs in Kenya and 3 lakhs in Tanzania combining. Okay, rules, laws, regulations, everything of course greatly affected them. They were living their life normally. 3 लाख उधर, 1.5 लाख इधर, ये 4.5 लाख लोग बड़े आराम से जी रहे थे, बढ़ रहे थे आगे जिंदगी में. The Britishers were going to flip their life and shift their life, uproot it upside down. It was going to be a huge impact on them. There were a lot of problems which they faced, the most prominent being continuous loss of grazing grounds. So it was not just one problem, right, with the Britishers, with the, not Britishers actually, with the colonizers coming in. So Africa was actually colonized by multiple countries. Germany भी पहुंच गया था, आपका ब्रिटेन भी पहुंच गया है, ऐसे करके ना multiple countries were claiming different parts. France was also there. They divided the entire African continent, you can say. ठीक है, तो अब इनकी सबसे बड़ी प्रॉब्लम क्या थी? जस्ट लाइक इंडियंस, इंडियन पैस्टरलिस्ट, दे वर ऑल्सो लूजिंग अ ह्यूज चंक ऑफ देयर ग्रेजिंग ग्राउंड्स. बहुत हिस्सा उनका धीरे धीरे होता जा रहा था, ग्रेजिंग ग्राउंड से कन्वर्ट होता जा रहा था. बिकॉज अगेन द कोलोनाइजर्स, एवरीवन हैड ओनली वन प्रायोरिटी, मेकिंग मनी. If the ground was not being cultivated, how would they make money? So they had to remove the grasses and start cultivating it and farming it. So next question is, Maasais are traditionally nomadic and pastoral people who depend on milk and meat for subsistence. Subsistence means survival. Is this statement true or is this statement false? क्या ये statement true है या ये statement false है? Alone hacker, hi बच्चे, good evening. Hi Reza Gaming, yes I am. How does that make a difference? Okay, and let's look at your responses. सबने दे दिया, wonderful. So we have धनुष, मिसबा, तन्मय, एब्सोल्यूट करेक्ट आंसर, परफेक्ट टाइमिंग. अंजलि और तरुण ने सही जवाब दिए बहुत जल्दी. राधिका एंड दृष्टि एंड मोहम्मद रिहान हैव टेकन एन अटेम्प्ट. दिस इज ट्रू, है ना. वो पैस्टरलिस्ट अपने पैस्टरलिस्ट थे और अपने जानवरों से मिले हुए मटेरियल पे ही डिपेंडेंट थे, जिसमें मिल्क, मीट, ये सारी चीजें हुआ करती थी. बच्चे, हाउ एल्स विल यू अर्न मनी एज अ पैस्टरलिस्ट? You can't just feed your animals and be happy, right? You will need money, so you'll have to sell the milk, the meat, the skin, or whatever different materials you're getting from those animals. Wool, for example. अब ये देखो, ये केन्या है, ये टंजानिया. I told you, right? Kenya and Tanzania. This was the 3 lakh home of the 3 lakh Maasais, and this was the home of the 1.5 lakh Maasais. ठीक है. Now pre-colonial Maasai land कैसा था? प्री-कॉलोनियल मसाई लैंड, ये दिस इज द स्ट्रेच ऑफ द प्री-कॉलोनियल मसाई लैंड, जिसमें थोड़ा सा केनिया, थोड़ा सा तंजानिया है. साउथ पोर्शन ऑफ केनिया, नॉर्थ ऑफ तंजानिया. एंड दिस होल सेक्शन, इट माइट लुक वेरी स्मॉल, बट सी, African itself is so big, and out of that, this entire portion just belongs to the Maasai, which means it is a huge portion. काफी बड़ा हिस्सा है ये, right? But now what is going to happen, you see, इस पूरे में इतना पूरा जो है is just Maasai land. But this entire portion of South Africa is now going to be divided between the different European imperial powers, which means the different colonizers that were coming to target for the resourceful African lands. ठीक है, तो हम देखते हैं कि इन्होंने अफ्रीका को कॉलोनीज में डिवाइड कर दिया, and hence naturally Kenya and Tanzania got divided in 2 portions. So now we see that there were international boundaries. ये जो portion था आपका Kenya and Tanzania का, which was basically Maasai land, who did not care about the boundaries, who were not bothered about these things. But their portion gets now internationally divided between British Kenya and German Tanzania in 1885. So basically Tanzania का portion Germany ले लेती है, Kenya का portion Britain ले लेता है, and this portion gets divided. This 3 lakh and 1.5 lakh people get divided. Their land get divided. Now Maasai land was gradually taken over by the white settlement, by the European colonizers. धीरे धीरे कर करके encroach करते गए, फैलते गए वो पूरे इस Maasai land में, which resulted in a loss of 60% of Maasai land. That huge portion that belonged to the Maasais, more than half of that they lost to the Britishers, because they started controlling those lands, they started operating on those lands and had given no rights to the Maasais to figure out what they could do with it. They were confined to smaller, dry regions with uncertain rainfall and very, very poor pastures. But one thing we have to understand, ठीक है, एक चीज हमें समझना होगा, that Maasais decided, or let's say any pastoralist of Africa, if they decided to stay in the dry region or the semi-dry region and not be farmers but be pastures, they still had some greenery of different forms available to them. But what Britishers are doing, they are pushing them into small corners of their own big area, which was necessarily very, very dry, hardly had any greenery, which means the pasture were really, really poor, and there was no rainfall. So why did they give up on this land? अगर ये भी सोचना हुआ कि इस जमीन को इतने आराम से ब्रिटिशर्स ने या जर्मन ने कैसे छोड़ दिया, colonizers ने कैसे छोड़ दिया? Because there was no rainfall, so there would be no farming possible over here. मतलब even if there was some rainfall or low rainfall, something you can cultivate there. बट यहाँ तो रेनफॉल का पता ही नहीं है, तो ये जमीन तो वैसे ही उनके काम की नहीं थी. तो उन्होंने मसाइस को कहा, आप इधर रहो. वॉट एवर ग्रास एंड फूड वॉज अवेलेबल फॉर द एनिमल्स वॉज नॉट गोइंग टू बी एनफ. इट वॉज रियली बैड क्वालिटी. सो that was the way in which they started losing the grazing land, because again here also the grazing land started getting converted for various purposes of, let's say, construction, for various purposes of cultivation, every way and any way in which the colonizers could make money. British colony की बात करें, अगर British Kenya की बात करते हैं, their policies encouraged local communities to expand cultivation, same farming. Right? They would just want everyone to farm wherever there was a fertile land, even if the grasses were growing, even if the grasses were the food of the animals, they would not bother. Simply ask them to change this land into cultivated fields. India वाला same system यहाँ भी होता है. Because of this, there will be a reversal in economic and political dominance of Maasai pastoralists over the agricultural neighbors. But basically, Maasais were quite rich, you could say, because all of this land, which we just saw, actually belonged to the Maasais. They were these landowners. They had these huge cattle. So they had good amount of money. And because of which, they were also not ready to work for Britishers or any other colonizers. But a lot of pastoralists were forced to work as laborers. Why? When the colonizers went to these places, they thought that they can't get the people from their country to come and work here, right? They would want the localites to work. But because most of the people were pastoralists, they were very happy with their animals, with their trading, they were making decent money, they were not ready to work for them. So they even had shortage of laborer, which was a big another problem for them. So they were trying their best by hook or by crook, जैसे तैसे करके इन लोगों के जानवरों को हटाओ, पैस्टोरलिज्म का काम खत्म करो और इनको लेबरर्स में कन्वर्ट कराओ. लेट्स स्टार्ट कन्वर्टिंग देम इनटू लेबरर्स, इनटू द पीपल हु वुड बी रेडी टू वर्क फॉर अस. गेट रिड ऑफ देयर एक्टिविटी ऑफ पैस्टोरलिज्म वन वे और द अदर. This was one of those agendas, but primarily it was to generate more money by farming activities and producing cash crops. Second, what they started doing, Masais, which were very rich, very dominant because they had a lot of area in their control. So economically they were very profound, they had grown. Political dominance भी उससे बन जाती है. वो धीरे जैसे क्या होता है, colonizers आते हैं, it starts reducing, it starts decreasing because now this land is being taken over by the colonial power. अब उसको पूरा पूरा कौन कंट्रोल कर रहा है? colonial power कंट्रोल कर रहा है. ठीक है. So now the large areas of grazing land were changed into game reserves like the Masai Mara. So there were different areas, right? Masai Mara और भी जो चीजें थी. So how they changed the forest in India, reserved forest, protected forest, all these portions which belong to the tribals, the pastoralists had been taken over by the colonial government. Same thing they'll do this over here also. ठीक है. अब क्या करेंगे? They will start changing these places into reserves. Like Masai Mara will, and then your Samburu National Park in Kenya, the Serengeti Park in Tanzania, they started basically covering those areas which had a lot of resource, different kind of good quality of wood. वो सब अपने हिसाब से वो करने लग गए थे. राधिका एक बार रिफ्रेश कर लो बच्चे. Masais were restricted from entering these reserves. So they were not allowed in these parks, they were not allowed in these forests, just like India. And naturally, be it for grazing or hunting, they will be very extremely affected. They wouldn't have food, the food access will be restricted, their traditional grounds will be gone, their power is gone, their money making is gone. They will be in a very, very bad position because of all of these shifts and changes. Now, what will happen? Whatever limited land is left, which is already having uncertain rainfall, already bad pastures, even if there was some land with good pasture, the quality and the quantity both will start reducing, both will start declining. So the grazing land loss of water resources, all of this will push Masais in very small areas where overgrazing will happen, pastures will reduce, they will deteriorate, the quality will deteriorate, and there will be a constant scarcity, there will be a constant shortage of fodder, the food for the animals. Okay? Tarun, yes, people go there for safari even in today's date to travel. That it does attract a lot of tourism. But that all used to be Maasai land. All of that used to belong to the Maasais. Can you imagine? Okay guys, Maasai land was divided by international boundary between British Kenya and German Tanzania in which year? 1885, 1860, 1855 और 1920. कौन से साल में इस जमीन पे हिस्सेदारी कर ली इन लोगों ने? तंजानिया और आपके केनिया वाले एरिया पे ब्रिटिशर्स और हमारे जर्मन्स ने. हाय आदित्य, गुड इवनिंग बच्चे. हाय सिद्धार्थ सारंगी, वेलकम टू द सेशन. एंड विल लुक एट द रिस्पॉन्सेज नाउ. देखते हैं किन किन बच्चों ने सही सही जवाब दे दिया है हमारे. तो हमारे पास आ गया है धनुष, मिसबा, मोहम्मद रेहान, तन्मय. परफेक्ट आंसर, गुड जॉब, परफेक्ट टाइमिंग. अंजलि बिश ने दिया जवाब सही और बहुत जल्दी. राधिका, तरुण, वैभवी ने लिया अटेम्प्ट. दृष्टि और गजिया रह गए हैं. 1885 इज द करेक्ट आंसर. दिस वाज द ईयर, है ना, इस साल पे लिया था. चलो अब बात करते हैं काउकोलान हर्डर्स इन अफ्रीका. बच्चे ये हर्डर्स कहाँ पे थे? नामीबिया नाम की एक जगह है, ठीक है. नामीबिया इज वन प्लेस. ट्रेडिशनली दीज हर्डर्स मूव्ड बिटवीन टू प्लेसेस ऑफ योर Kaukolan and near Ovambo land. And what would they do? They would sell the products like the skin and the meat in the neighboring markets. So they would basically and simply do trading in their products that they were producing from their from their life of pastoralists, from their animals that they were breeding. But now what has happened? A boundary, a territorial boundary has been drawn. एक boundary खींच दी गई है, अब उनकी limitations बना दी गई हैं. Because of this, it halted their movement between regions. And which is this boundary? These boundaries are between various European colonies. Which means it's not like it's just one country which has occupied entire Africa, right? Had it been even just one country which had occupied the entire country and colonized the entire country, the movement of the people would have been still easier. But because of this, what is happening? उनकी movement बहुत restricted है. वो एक देश से दूसरे देश के कॉलोनी में घुस नहीं सकते हैं. Like German Tanzania and British Kenya वाला हिस्सा हो गया. तो British से German region में जाना मुश्किल है. तो अब इनकी वजह से जो इनका ट्रेडिशनल ट्रेड था, जो प्रैक्टिस था, ये जो फेयर लगाते थे, ऑल ऑफ दैट वाज एक्सट्रीमली affected. The herders, they faced imprisonment within these boundaries, unable to understand why they were restricted. So they thought, fine, it's okay, you have your boundaries, but we'll move, kya hoga? But they started being punished for it. And they were not even able to understand why are we being punished? This is one country, this is one land, why are you not letting us move? They were not able to figure out the power division that these European countries were doing between themselves, because their access to the market, the resource, that was getting limited. They were getting affected. They thought we can move, and they started moving, but obviously just to be landing up in the prison, just to be punished at the end of the day. They expressed difficulty in obtaining meat from south, faced challenges in sending their goods, and were barred from entering into the Ovambo land, where they had lived for a very long time. So they're not able to go back home. They're not able to move the products that were moving from one place to another. In short, they were really troubled, restricted, and had no other option, no other alternative to earn money, which they had been doing for years together, generations together. इतने सालों से, इतने generation से करते आ रहे थे. All of a sudden, with these people coming in, it all changed like that. As a result of which, what will be the effect on their livelihood? Borders will be closed, okay? And herders will try to push that boundary. They will try not let this happen, right? They'll try the movement to keep the movement going up, but it will only affect their life. They will not be able to sustain easily, and it will lead to a lot of struggle and loss of money and struggle to earn their livelihood. पैसे कमाना अब उनके लिए बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा. So what were the other border restrictions if you talk about on the African pastoralists? The worst part, you guys, was that, okay, chalo, the portion which got divided. But what about the land which was of one particular colony? For example, British colony. For example, German colony. Even within that, the movement of these pastoralists was extremely limited. Earlier, they were very free to roam around wherever they wanted. जिस जगह जाना है, घास खिलाना है, जो करना है, घूमो फिरो, कोई टेंशन नहीं है. And whenever the grass was over, they would move to a different place. But now, the colonial government was there, and they started confining the lands to reserves. अब वो जंगलों को reserve करने लग गए थे, restrict करने लग गए थे movement. But the worst part was that there were areas which were restricted, where only the European power, whichever country's colony was it, they could enter. The Maasais, or let's say the blacks of Africa, were not allowed to enter in their own country. A lot of areas were restricted that ways also. ठीक है? And if they needed to graze their animals, just like India, they needed a special permit. It would have proper timings and everything. The permit did not get easily sanctioned. There was money that was required for the permit. And disobedience, of course, if you're not following the rules and the regulation, will simply make you land in the jail and land you up with a lot of punishments. Okay? As I told you, they were even prohibited from going to their own markets. अपने ही जगह पे बाजार नहीं जा सकते थे, कई regions में नहीं जा सकते थे. Wherever the whites were settled, ठीक है, they would always feel that the pastoralists were not civilized, they were not human, they were like animals, they were dangerous, they were criminals, just like India they were thinking. And they would hence make boundaries. In their own city, there were areas like markets and residential areas where the people, the Maasai who owned the entire land, in their own lands they were not allowed to enter a lot of places, and even if they did, there were very extreme punishments for that. Okay? Their boundaries were restricted, they had to find alternatives to their occupation. There were extreme effects on their trading, on their pastoralism, but of course trading continued under significant limitations. They did keep up with the trading, but it had a lot of limitations to it, a lot of restrictions to it. So what did we do today? Summarizing the session, we read that if you talk about Indian pastoralists, how did they cope with the changes? They reduced the number of cattle, right? They decided, hi Gitika, welcome bache, good evening. They decided that they won't be able to survive if these people kept on doing what they were doing. So might as well reduce the number of animals. Richer pastoralists, they basically bought land, became landlords and farmers and stopped their nomadic life. Poor pastoralists borrowed money from moneylenders in return of their cattle, sheep, and worked in fields or small towns, basically found alternate job. ठीक है मैम, जब उनको rights दिया गया तो क्या उन्होंने protest नहीं किया? अच्छा, जब उनके rights लिए गए, Misbah, of course they protested, they tried to fight, right? But how did India struggle? Similarly, Africans also struggle. The Britishers were very powerful. They would make people suffer, put extreme punishments, imprison them. So the best way they felt was probably just to accept it, because they were now being dominated by new countries who were more powerful, right? Then in pastoralism in Africa, we saw there were multiple communities of pastorals like the Bedouins, Berbers, Maasai, Somali, Boran, Turkana. Because of the new rules and regulations and the laws and the policies of the colonial rules, the land were taken away and the movement was restricted, the pastures started dying, and even they had to find alternative jobs. So pastoralists are neither savage nor dangerous. They are like many other groups, people trying to adapt to new ways of life which was being imposed on them. But in a lot of cases, they have resisted adjusting to the ways of modern world. They wanted to continue their way of life and not wanted to lose and make it a thing of the past. But how will they redefine their life with the colonial oppressors? That we are going to learn on Monday. So please do not forget to register for your session. Please make sure you go on the Embibe app or website and get yourself registered for the upcoming session. Do check out the Embibe Lens app, you guys. And please do not forget to join the Telegram channel. This is the link and this is the QR code. So on that note, I'm going to bid adieu to you. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend. And I'll see you guys soon on Monday. Till then, take good care of yourselves. Students watching on YouTube, do not forget to hit the like button, share the video with your friends, subscribe to the channel. And do tell me in the comment section, how did you like the video? If you have any doubts, if you want me to take anything else. And you guys make sure to register yourselves on the sessions that's going to come up next week. Guys, all the sessions are not going to happen both on Embibe platform and YouTube. We will be now having different sessions on both the platform. So just be in touch with both and do not forget to register for the Embibe app sessions. And the timing is also changing. So just keep a check on that. I'll see you on Monday. Till then, have a great weekend. Stay tuned and keep imbibing.
Keep imbibing. We believe in you.